Okay, so I think that was in Casey's first slide, so I'll just skip that and get right to it. So the first question is, what do you want to go see when you're planning a trip? And, there's lots of choices. Mountains are probably my favorite. The vista you can see from a mountain or at a mountain. And we've got lots of nice choices around here. We've got the Cascades, we've got the Sierra Nevadas, we've got even the Rockies. That top picture there on the left is the Middle Sister near Bend. It's a great scenic place. Rivers and lakes, some folks like the water part, nice bubbling brook, running water, or lake. The lake you see there is Hoffer Lake. It's up near the Anthony Lake ski area. And actually there's a wonderful hike around those mountains you see there, and lots of good camping spots. Some folks like to go see flowers and trees. The desert flowers are out full time right now. It's just beautiful out in the desert. If you like trees, you got to kind of get to the west side to see the really big ones. And if you want to see some really big ones, go over to the Olympics. There's places, trees there you have to kind of pace around. They're so big. And then we talked a lot about wildlife. Some people actually like to go find it. And so anyway, this discussion is, I like to talk with my hands, so my hands are moving as I'm talking. So I never talked to a computer screen before. It's rather interesting. Anyway, you've had some technical talks about tents and gear and clothes, and you're going to have more. But these two on the trip planning and the safety is more, I'm going to say, philosophical. It's what do you want to do with being out backpacking? And it's not to do the things like sweat and get tired and swat mosquitoes and lay on the hard ground. It's to see this kind of stuff. Okay, again, I can't get the down arrow to work, Casey.
Try clicking again on the screen. Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay, I just clicked on the screen with my cursor, so I guess that'll work. Okay, so where do you go to see this good stuff? I'm kind of, the mountains, I'm kind of partial to them, but don't give up on the desert. There are some really cool places to camp from here north all the way to Grand Coulee Dam, down on the Snake River. So mountains, desert. The coast is wonderful to go backpacking, especially if you hit the 3 good days a year that they have there. No, they have more than that. I'm just teasing. This is down by Cannon Beach, Seaside, Oregon. But where you go, can be close to home, far away. That's going to affect the costs that you have. So that's something to consider on where you go, is what the days it's going to take to get there, what the cost is going to be. And picking a place, there's lots of good resources. You've got guidebooks, you've got other experienced backpackers, you got IMAC, WTA is great. So lots of places to look to find places to go. But what you should remember, anywhere you go, you're going to need to see what permits might be required. That's going to be a bigger issue. You need permits to go to the enchantments. You need permits to go on Mount Rainier backpacking. They're just starting that up around the Sisters Wilderness in Oregon, Yosemite. Some of them are easy to get. Some of them are a lottery type thing. So check what permits you need, even trailhead permits, America the Beautiful. If you go on state land in Washington, you need a Discover Pass. So think about where you're going to go and how you can get there. Okay, so when do you go? Spring, now a great time to go to the desert. It's still cool, the flowers are out. And then summer, that's obviously the most popular time. And what you kind of do is chase the snow up the mountain. And as you do that, you're chasing the wildflowers and the critters are following you up. And summer is a great time. I think my personal favorite is the fall. The bugs are gone, the weather's cooled down. You got to be a little careful. The trees are turning color in the brush. Fall is a good time. You do got to watch out for hunters and perhaps the weather changing. Winter, I'm kind of 3-season guy, but winter camping is cool. There's an IMAC fella named Forrest Teller who actually takes out groups to build igloos and build snow caves. So don't give up on that. I just put in that winter picture. Those folks are hunkered down pretty good. Um, okay, so here's an interesting question: is who do you go with? And there's lots of choices. Family, that top picture is my son and my sister, and we did about 150 miles together on the PCT down in Oregon. Um, we still consider ourselves in the same family. We did well actually together. My son was the pyromaniac, my sister did the cooking, and I was the navigator. Often neither of those guys can tell which way is up, so it was we had our roles. Um, Go with friends, that's great. People you know, that you get along with, um, as a good choice. Your significant other, that is an interesting one. It can either strengthen your relationship significantly or just be a mess. So I think it's a good one myself. Um, there's also, I guess I'd call them, who do you go with? It would be a random group. For example, if you go on IMAC backpack, it could most likely be with some people you know, some you don't. And so that leads to, just learning how to interact with people on the trail and stuff. It's good as novices for the folks in the class to go with experienced backpackers at least a couple of times. And that can be a little intimidating because, well, they know what they're doing, and a lot of them are old and cranky and have their ways set, so, or you can go with all novices, so everybody's clueless. I wouldn't recommend that, but solo hiking on your own, day hiking, I don't mind so much. Backpacking, I don't know. I usually like to go with people backpacking. The number of people, though, is important. You don't want too many. There are regulations. Like in the enchantments, you can only have a group of 8. Most wildernesses are 12. So anyway, think about who it is you want to go with. Okay, so we're going to switch. Oops, I need to go back up here. Boy, Casey, I'm really struggling with this. There we go. So I guess I'll click on the screen and then do the button. Is that where we're at, or?
I think so. I think if you click away from the presentation, it will, you have to click back on it to get the control back.
Okay, what would you like me to do? Just keep talking?
Yep, just keep going. We have one question.
Okay.
Are there any good desert hikes that you recommend for this time of year?
I really like Ancient Lakes. It's up by Othello, and it's kind of big, wide open area there. A lot of flat places where you can, camp overnight. I believe it's a state park, so you need a Discover Pass. Lots of pretty wildflowers, and there's a couple of lakes there, and actually a waterfall out in the desert. That's pretty cool. That would be one I'd recommend this time of year.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have any experience with Juniper Dunes?
I've never camped there or anything. Hiking around, walking around, and it is, is interesting. It's in the sand dunes.
Yeah.
But I don't know of any particular camping spots there.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience as well. I think that's pretty much a day trip. I'm not sure if there's any water sources out there. You might have to pack in a lot of water if you're trying to go overnight.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's talk about the kind of trips that you can do. You can go out and back. That's really nice for an overnighter. You go to a place, camp out for a night, and come back out. Your car's there waiting. It's usually not too far. There are loop trails that you can make as long or as short as you want. But if you're doing a loop, you come back to where you started, so you've got transportation. But one thing you want to be careful of as you explore it is you want to decide if you're going to go clockwise or anti-clockwise. And I guess that's an Australian term. It's counterclockwise, because they can be very, very different hikes. One going one way could have a lot of steep stuff in it and a long gradual downhill, or vice versa. So pick the way you go around a loop. You can do a one-way trip, which you need to park something at both ends, have a chauffeur, have a just a shuttle back and forth with 2 cars. So one way you can get a lot farther, but it takes some logistics. And a fun one is a key exchange. If you have 2 groups, one starts at each end of a one-way or both-way trip, you meet in the middle, trade keys, and then they continue on the way you're going, and you've got a car when you get to the end. IMAC has done a couple of times White Pass to Chinook Pass that way. And a 3-day trip, on the lunch the second day, you meet, trade keys, and everybody gets home quick. So those are just types of routes you can take. No, it's doing 2. There. Okay, conditioning. My wife picked that black and white picture. I got strength training in high heels, probably in the mid 50s. I don't know, but strength, you do need some upper body strength because you're gonna be putting your pack on, you're gonna be carrying it, and to keep your posture, keep your form, you need some upper body strength while you're carrying that pack, as well as to keep some weight off of your hips. You also need some endurance, not like the marathon runner there on the right, but walking 2 miles along the river is not the same as walking 6 miles at elevation on steep slopes. So you need both that strength and endurance for backpacking. And I always train with a pack. A lot of people like to carry water and doing tennis shoes. I almost always carry at least my day pack, and then build up as I'm going to go on a hike or on a backpack trip. There's also a bit of, I call it psychological conditioning, not to scare anybody off, but you're probably going to get tired. You're probably going to get sore. You may have to swat some bugs. You might pick the wrong companions. So mentally, you've kind of got to be ready to go as well. And so for that thing, I would really recommend that you go on the backpacking class trips just to kind of get some of this. A lot of IMAC vetting is done by what they call the Badger Mountain test. It's like, how many times can you walk up the canyon side of Badger in a day? If it's once, you can climb about 800 feet. If it's 3 times, you can climb 2,400 feet. So that's a way to kind of judge how your conditioning is. But I like the Dirty Harry Clint Eastwood quote at the bottom there. A man or woman, you got to know your limitations and don't overdo it, or for that matter, underdo it. Okay, this is probably the most complicated slide I have in this section. And what it has to do with is you got to figure out what the distance. Oh, I just saw from the chat room, is there a McBee test? Yeah, that's a good one. McBee is probably 1,000 foot of elevation over 3/4 of a mile. That is a real tough one. And the hard part's coming down. So, everybody, you ought to give it a shot at McBee with your big pack once in a while, just to learn your limitations. I like that. So, distance, you can say what the distance is of your trip. Say it's 20 miles. Well, some folks can do 20 miles in a day, and some it might take 4 or 5 days. So what you're really trying to figure out is how many days it's going to take you to do it. And all days are not the same. Your first day, you might spend half of it driving, and your last day, you might spend half of it driving. So those don't really count as good full days. So you got to kind of plan through that. Days are putting your camp up. Figure that's going to take you some time in the evening. And then maybe more importantly, in the morning, it's going to take time to take your tent down, eat breakfast. Some people do that in 10 minutes. Some people take 2 hours. So you really got to look at your time on a given day of what you're going to do. And then speed would seem simple. The book that you have, and this whole concept is discussed in detail. I believe it's on page 13 in the book. So you can, look at that. But they say 2 miles an hour as a rule of thumb. is probably a good speed, but I'm saying you got to make your own rules. That's kind of hardcore, because it's really, if it's walking time, yeah, maybe, but you're not walking all the time. You recommend a 5-minute break every hour. I think that's a good call. People want to look at the scenery, stop to take pictures. You're going to stop for lunch. So, you know, what would the hours in a day you actually want to walk be to tell how far you're going to get? And the last part of that puzzle is elevation. And that's two things. It's elevation. We live at 500 feet. You go up the Chinook Pass and you're at 5,000 feet. You're going to be sucking wind. So you're going to go slower than if you time your speed. Let's say on Badger Mountain, which is a good idea. They've got markers every quarter mile. Figure out how long it takes you to walk a mile up the canyon trail, around the flat Langdon Trail, just so you can get a feel for what your pace is, because it's your hike. And then besides just the change in elevation for us, it's going uphill, and you see that on the left, down bottom on the left, and coming downhill is not as fast as you might think it is. And the top picture is a nice flat piece of the PCT just south of White Pass, so you can make great time on that. The other two are really not fair. They're parts of the Inca Trail in Peru that we did last summer. So that'll slow you down a bit. And you never make up the time you lose going uphill, going down. It just doesn't work that way. Another good resource is some of the books I showed will have these elevation charts in them. So if you look at the top one there on the left-hand side, that's going from White Pass up to about halfway to Chinook Pass. And you can see it's pretty flat. You know, you bounce between up or down around 5,000 feet, nothing real spectacular. So you can make pretty good time on that trip. If you look at the one below, that's Snoqualmie Pass to Stevens Pass, and you're going to be a lot slower every day on that than you would be doing the other one. So those are the kind of things you got to think about on the distance of your trip. Maybe it times out, Casey. Is that what it's doing? Ah, jeez.
I think it's whenever I click away to answer something in a group chat.
Okay, okay, so
But as soon as you click back in, you got it.
Then I got it. Okay. Okay, so a couple things quickly along the way. I don't know how I'm doing for time on this part, but anyway, your campsite. Look at those top 3 campsites. And I've called them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, these are all at the same place, same day. And you guys, I can't hear you or talk to you, but you pick which one you think is good. And we'll start with me laying there in the meadow in the sunshine. That's the bad choice. My son is down there by the water. It's beautiful. It's called Sister's Mirror Lake. He says, I'm going to sleep right by the water. When the sun comes up, I'm going to see the mountain. Well, when we woke up in the morning, I had frost on my tent. My son was in a fog bank and got hypothermia. We couldn't see him from where we were. My sister put it up under the trees. That's the good site. So just consider where you want to camp out, if you will. Water, you're going to hear a lot about next time. Water has a couple things. You really need it. Sometimes it's hard to get because mosquitoes live near water. And that scene of my son and I pumping water, the mosquitoes were so bad, it was a 3-person operation. I was pumping, he was keeping the hoses straight, and after my sister got done taking the picture, she was swatting the mosquitoes off of us. So and then food, you'll get a good class on that next week. Bring lots of it and eat it all. That's how you keep your energy up. And lastly, alternatives. That's something I always like to do, is plan an escape route for every trip you got. You know, if something bad happens, know what's around you where you can get out quick and easy. Or if you get to your campsite that you plan to go to and it's full, or it just got flooded and it's a mess. You know, you've got to have alternatives that you can plan on. And I think I have one more slide in this, one or two maybe. Okay, I'm not going to talk about navigation. That's what Casey's going to do. But I like to use Green Trails maps just because they're very accurate, they're easy to work with, and they can give you some of those alternatives. To read a Green Trails map, you can see on the left, there's letters, on the top, there's numbers. So if you go to A4, you'll see Trail 2000 there. That's the PCT. And the first little number in red is, I think, 4,600. Below it is a 0.7, then there's a 4,700. So that's the elevation change, 100 feet over 7/10 of a mile, flat as a pancake. So an alternative route, if you want it not to get off the PCT, if you go east to A5, there's a little tent sign there, and that's a designated campground. Doesn't have any facilities, but it has spots to camp in. And there are two other kinds of campgrounds. If you go to spot C1, you'll see Soda Springs Campground. And that actually is a campground with facilities. There's a road that ends there. So you have that kind. And then there are the campgrounds that aren't on the maps. So if you go back to call it B4, there's a spot called Snow Lake, which is one of the prettiest camping places I've ever seen. But it's not designated. Okay.
Not to interrupt, but I think
Yeah.
you can use your mouse to show where we're at too.
Oh, I
You
can.
should be able to see your mouse if you're moving it.
Okay. Here is Snow Lake right there. Did that work?
Yep,
Okay.
that worked.
And so here's Soda Springs over to the west. Here is Twin Lakes. So if, let's say, you were going to White Pass and you got in trouble, you got places to bail out. The other thing that you need alternatives for is water. So for example, here you can see there's all kind of lakes you go through. So you don't need to carry water for the whole day. You can get it whenever you need it, and water is the heaviest thing you carry. So that is a real help. But if you go on, let's say, the trail number 45 right here, turns into 44, goes over to Soda Springs, you'll notice there's no water there at all. So that looks like, I can't read it on the screen here, 6 miles or so. You're probably going to need to pack more. So anyway, those are kind of the alternatives that I wanted to mention with navigation. Like I say, I like paper just to have it, because you've also got a wide area that you can see what's around you. Okay, let me go. Okay, so in summary for trip planning, make a good plan, be flexible, because the plan, I said often, probably always changes on the way. Have fun at it. And my segue into the next talk is be safe. So I'm going to get a sip of water. Casey, I don't know, would you like to have any questions or?
Yes, please. Everybody, what are your questions? Feel free to drop them in the group chat or just unmute yourself and shout them out. So how do you estimate how long it will take you? Me, it comes down to your hiking speed. I personally cover about 2.5 miles an hour. Chuck, how do you estimate?
I usually figure 2, but it depends on the group. And that's probably the key. And then the elevation. If you're up high, you're gonna go slower. If you're climbing steep, or an old guy like me going downhill is probably worse than going up, you're gonna go slower. So I just kind of factor that in from experience. And I usually do count on a bit of rest every hour or so. So I would probably be a little slower than you, but I probably got 35 years on you too, so.
Probably. Next question is from Elaine. For the graduation trip, how many times a day would Badger Mountain equivalent be?
Most of the trips that I know about so far are generally fairly easy ones. So they would be, maybe one climb of Badger, say 1,000 feet or less in elevation, and around 5 or 6 miles, maybe. Is that about right, Casey?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Ingalls Creek. I'd have to look at the stats, but I know our Packwood Lake trip is 400 feet total of elevation gain and 5 miles. So doing the Badger test, you double the elevation, and you just need to add in a little bit of mileage, and you got it. Chuck, do you have any tips for hiking with kids? Dory's wondering how many miles a 6-year-old could do.
Oh boy, there is a great hiking book. Let me see if I can find it quick a second.
Dory, well, I don't have kids myself, but I have read a little bit about it. While Chuck's looking for that book, I have always heard that it's important to have plenty of snacks and plenty of breaks.
No, I can't
Dennis,
spot
do you
it.
have
I
any?
can't spot it right now. But again, Badger Mountain's probably a good place to test a kid for their attention span, for one. But I've got some grandsons, and I usually don't have them carry much weight at all. Maybe their water and snacks till they're maybe 12 or so. Now my son lived in Utah, and at 12 he was a peak bagger. He'd been up over half a dozen 10,000 footers there, so he can go like crazy. Now his younger brother, he likes to whine and cry a lot, and so it's a different experience. You just really got to try them. I can't. There is a book. It's like Good Hikes with Kids. It's kind of one of the Mountaineer books, and so I'd recommend look. And you can actually go to the WTA site and look up hikes with children. I mean, that's one of the things you can sort on, and so a lot of the desert hikes are good because they're pretty flat.
Danette, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, I was just throwing my comments in the thing. I was saying, if they don't want to, what's in it for me always works for a lot of audiences. What's in it for them? If they don't want to go, I'd wonder why I'm taking them, because why ruin a good time for me? But anyway, also, go ahead, Chuck, go ahead.
Another good thing that I've learned with kids, when they get tired, let them lead, and they just somehow all of a sudden perk up and woohoo, I'm in charge, I'm leading now, and they just kind of buzz along and get a second win. So that's something they can think about as well.
Totally. If they are leading, not only are they kind of in charge, but they don't have to catch up. They don't have to keep up. It's a mental thing. It's very much a mental game, even for adults. It's a very mental game. It really is.
Yep.
Because what they're looking for, they'll find. So if their mind is spinning around and around on, this is boring, why are we doing this? I hate hiking, I hate the dirt, then they're just going to attract, that. So give them something to do, give them something to count. If you know there's water coming up, do you hear the water? Where's the water? And help them identify like their favorite things. What do you love about it? Is
And a big bunch of gummy bears.
Yeah, that. Mm-hmm. Pavlov's dogs.
Yeah. I'd say let's proceed, Casey, because this next talk can get long, and I would want to make sure you get time in. So